Some years ago, when I was teaching in the public schools, a gentleman whose name I fortunately forget was conducting a study of how to discover the characteristics of a good teacher. At that time, I was considered a master teacher and therefore qualified to teach student teachers. I simply can't resist throwing in the comment here that there was a certain amount of measured merriment on the part of the gentleman conducting the study that I was a master teacher and couldn't be a mistress because that didn't sound well. At any rate, perhaps I should say that the reason that I was considered to be a master teacher in the subject of speech and drama was because I had a certain number of academic credit hours in those subjects. It wasn't necessarily because I was a good teacher, or although I like to think I was, but because I had sat through a prescribed number of classes, awake or asleep, and passed the right number of courses. Having been thus qualified, I was asked to enhance my work with the student teachers by taking a course, which was designed, I was told, to quantitatively discover whether or not a teacher was doing a good job of teaching. The method of discovering this quality went as follows. The members of the class were given a long list of items which supposedly covered all the things a teacher might be doing in class. These items ranged from lecturing to giving affirmative responses to a student by nodding your head or saying yes, yes, to criticizing a student in front of the class. There were 24 items in all. I wish I could remember more of them, but suffice it to say, they did seem to cover a wide range of teacher behavior. Each of these 24 behaviors of a student in a classroom was given a number. And those of us learning this technique were to watch a teacher teach with a stopwatch, and every 10 seconds write down the behavior he or she was exhibiting in the classroom. At the end of our classroom hour, those of us watching the teacher were to statistically analyze and weigh the behaviors the teacher had exhibited. What the whole thing came down to was that if a teacher was talking less than 55% of the time, he or she was doing a good job teaching. Exactly what the teacher was saying didn't seem to make a difference. The crucial number was 55%. If a teacher talked less than percentage of the time, he or she was doing a good job teaching. To say I was in a state of shock during this whole course would be putting it mildly. But when I objected to this whole method of judging good teaching, I was told that I was fighting the problem. We needed, I was told, a good quantitative way of measuring a good teacher. We needed to judge by numbers, percentages, statistics, facts, which were obvious to everyone. We needed a form of measurement for a good teacher so that anyone at all could watch someone teach and judge whether he or she was doing a good job. All of this took place some years ago. I've been asking myself some questions ever since. What kind of objectivity are we getting when we rely on quantitative analysis? And what happens when we try to judge our human qualities or abilities through publicly observable data, which can be described only in so-called pure observation language, meaning numbers? Before I go any further, I should say that Bert Peterson had originally planned to join me in this service. We had several long discussions about what we wanted to say. When he found he could not be in town this morning, he gave me a copy of a poem which he had wanted to include in this service. The poem indicates just how pervasively numbers have crept into our thinking. It's called Demographic Housing by F.J. Osborne. For newlyweds, a 2-room flat's statistically right. A little room to eat in and a little room for love. And when they want a relative or a friend to stay the night, they must move. Continuance of the race is nature's plot for wife and man, though some have hopes for years of fun ere grounding in that groove. If a baby happens sooner than intended in their plan, they must move. And then, who knows, a father's pride, the passion of a mother, may quicken at the winged touch of one untimely dove. Should they defy discretion and decide to have another, they must move. Suppose a third arrives, or say a widowed dad or mum, the dwelling still must fit the household unit like a glove, and as though life's vicissitudes their numbers go and come, they must move. Until at length, the fate of every family must be faced. A child leaves home to marry, or a parent's called above. Good Lord, they got a room to spare. What wicked social waste. They must. To begin our explanation of trying to achieve objectivity by using numbers, I decided to write a parable. Now, a parable is defined as a short, fictional story which presents a comparison to be explored. Parables are supposed to suggest attitudes and invite you, the listener or reader, to make a judgment. I've asked Sidney Wilde-Nugent and Dick Smith to help me in presenting this story to you. And a little later on in the story, I'm going to ask you, our congregation, to also play a part. We'll begin with the most satisfactory way of telling a story, at least for me, and that is, once upon a very long time ago, there lived a group of human beings in a very delightful set of circumstances. They lived in an environment which was genuinely friendly to them, so that they really had no problems with any of the necessities of life. The climate was temperate, without extremes of heat or cold. The sun shone almost every day, and the air was fresh and pure. Around them were all of the goodies which can be supplied by a bountiful nature, such as young trees to build a shelter in case they wanted privacy, and green leaves to fashion any clothing they might wish, a beautiful lake with sparkling clear water, and best of all, bushes, which supplied a very nutritious and tasty berry, which was their food. Were they happy? Oh, I'm not sure whether they knew they were happy or not. Probably by our measurements, we would say that they had to be supremely happy. But then these people didn't know that happiness had to be measured. They were very content to be part of their beautiful world. They laughed a lot and enjoyed each other's company immensely.
Something must have happened to spoil all of this. We can't have a story without conflict, and so far there isn't any.
One year, these human beings finally developed some problems. The tasty and nutritious berries, which had been their main diet, suddenly became scarce. There just didn't seem to be enough berries to go around. Gradually, most of these human beings began to grow thin and gaunt and to suffer from malnutrition. 2 of the human beings, however, seemed able to find berries enough to keep themselves well fed. Perhaps their eyes were sharper so that they found all the berries on a bush, or perhaps Lady Luck smiled on them. At any rate, these 2 remained healthy and strong.
And there's the conflict. I'm sure the human beings who couldn't find berries were jealous of the 2 who could. The haves versus the have-nots.
Wasn't just a question of jealousy. These human beings were hungry, except, of course, the 2 who could find enough berries. And these 2 were uncomfortable because they liked the other human beings, and they wanted to be able to laugh again and enjoy each other. Finally, the 2 fast berry pickers came up with a plan. Each human being would bring all the berries he or she had picked for the day and put them into a big pile. Then each person would be able to eat from the big pile of berries whenever he or she was hungry.
And how did that system work?
At first, everything seemed to go well. The whole system sounded so reasonable. But soon there began to be rumblings of complaint among some of these human beings. And here we're going to ask you, our congregation, to join with us in some of the conversations which began to take place. This side, which is the left side, will read where the first responsive reading says, "Congregation left." And this side, right, will read the part of the congregation right. Maybe you'd like to stand up. It gets tiring sitting on those seats. And we get to stand up, so let's everybody stand up. Incidentally, Dick and I are joining congregations left, and Sydney and Lita will read with congregation right. All right, here we go.
We are certain that you said 9 and picking berries to feed us all. We saw some of you, whose names we will not mention, sleeping under the berry bushes. You didn't do your share. It isn't fair. We have watched and seen that you pick berries slowly, popping many in your mouth instead of in the basket to feed us all. You didn't do your share. It isn't fair. You eat too fast and much too many berries. We have seen you reach with both your hands to gobble up the berries we have picked to feed us all. You do not think of us. You eat more than your share. It isn't fair. The berries you pick for us are dry and rotten and filled with worms. We who pick long hours to feed us all have only leftovers when you finish. You do not think of us. You do not care. It isn't fair.
Oh, I get the picture. I don't think we need to hear any more of these complaints. Did these people ever get their situation resolved?
Finally, they did work out a plan. And here again, we'll ask you to join our drama by reading some parts. The right side of our congregation can begin this time with responsive reading number 2.
We must make sure that all of us work full 8-hour day, picking berries to feed us all. No sleeping, no talking, no laughing,
Everybody can sit down now since you don't play your part for a little while. And when it's time for your turn, I'll ask you to stand over here. And so began the system among these human beings of using quantity to make sure that each and every person did what they should. Our group of human beings who had been free to enjoy their world now found themselves bound to the rules of numbers. Everyone had to work 8 hours a day picking berries, except, of course, those who had to spend 8 hours a day watching to make sure that everyone else was working 8 hours a day. And then there were the official counters of the berries picked by the human beings who were working 8 hours a day. Our group had discovered that in order to live in peace with each other, they had to count. And all of this was done in the name of equity.
But you haven't said anything about equity. All you've been talking about is the fact that these people decided to count the berries that each had picked, and to make sure that everyone worked 8 hours a day picking berries.
Well, that's equity. Everyone had to work the same number of hours a day.
But how did they divide the berries? Was it according to the needs of each person, or was it according to each person's deserts?
Well, if you remember the first part of the story, each person was going to put his or her berries in a pile and eat when he or she was hungry. That's what they were used to doing. But times had changed. With everyone picking berries 8 hours a day, there was no time for the pickers to eat whenever they were hungry. Regular meal times had to be established, a time when all the pickers could sit down and eat together.
But you still haven't said how they were dividing the berries, or are you avoiding that question?
Oh, I didn't think I was. I'll answer right away. After they had counted what each picker had brought in, they added the total number of berries and gave each human being the same number.
But that isn't equal. Some people need to eat more than other people.
And how about the fast pickers? If the berries brought in were counted every day, the two fast pickers must have become aware that they were bringing in more berries than anyone else. Didn't they think they deserved some kind of recognition?
In time, they did. It was the fast pickers' idea to ask the counters to call up out the number of berries each human being had picked during the day, so that each person would know where he or she stood.
Where they stood?
Of course. Each person then knew every day where he or she stood in the social order. If you picked the most berries, you were at the top of the hierarchy. If you picked the fewest, you were at the bottom.
I should imagine that this whole thing got competitive, too.
By all means. Each and every human being was continually trying to pick more berries to increase his or her social standing.
Even if it didn't matter, I mean, everyone got enough to eat no matter what his or her social standing was.
But times had changed, remember? Where a human being stood socially in relation to other human beings became important. They used the only way to compare that they had. They counted berries.
But what about the fast pickers? If they were at the top of their hierarchy every day, was that enough for them?
No, unfortunately, it wasn't. The two fast pickers decided they needed a special kind of recognition. At the end of dinner one evening, they asked to speak to the other human beings. Sidney and Dick, will you play the parts of the two fast pickers? And we'll ask you to the congregation to play the part of the other human beings. And this is responsive reading number 3. If you'd like to stand up because you're playing a part in this responsive reading also. This is number 3. And Sidney begins.
Oh, berry pickers of our community, we who are the faster pickers of berries wish to speak with you.
We welcome to talk with you, fast pickers of berries, in whose capable hands our whole substance rests.
You understand that we, the fastest berry pickers, are interested only in your welfare.
We understand. We know that we, the slower pickers of berries, are fortunate to have you in our community to share your berries with all of us.
We think that we, the fastest berry pickers, deserve some mark of honor. We pick berries faster, we pick more berries, we are more deserving because we pick more and faster.
Fast pickers of berries, how can we show our gratitude so that
everywhere, every day. We want the world to know we are the fastest and the best berry pickers.
We understand your desire to show all to see and hear you wherever you go, that you are worthy of distinction, because you pick berries faster and better.
Thank you, fellow human beings.
Is that the end of the story?
Oh, this story never ends. This is a parable, and parables are open-ended.
But we can't go on like this forever.
I guess you're right. We'll find an ending. The two fast berry pickers got their title and their necklace of fresh berries every day, and soon they began to be asked to settle disputes of various sorts that arose among the other human beings.
What kind of dispute?
Oh, the usual kind, like whether to count the berries that were spoiled or damaged in some way.
And how did they solve that one?
They decided that if a berry was less than half spoiled, it would be counted as edible. And if a berry was more than one half spoiled, then it didn't count at all.
Doesn't make sense.
Of course it does. You have to draw the line somewhere.
If some unlucky person got all of his berries half spoiled, he really wouldn't be getting a full share of his berries. He would be left hungry.
Aren't you exaggerating a bit? Just because a berry is half spoiled doesn't mean it's inedible, you know. A berry can be called spoiled if it's slightly bruised, or slightly overripe, or underripe, or dried, or a little squashed.
If a berry is spoiled, it's spoiled. You can't say a berry is good if it's half spoiled. It just isn't as good as a whole unspoiled berry. And it isn't filling either.
And this is a good place for our parable. As long as we are talking about dividing the berries equally among all the human beings, we have no argument. We can add up all the berries, divide by the number of human beings, and make a fair decision based on numbers. But as soon as we decide to judge the quality of the berries in a quantitative way, 50% good is the same as good, and over 50% spoiled is the same as bad, we've made some arbitrary decisions, decisions which have nothing to do with numbers. We are still pretending to be objective, but are we not fooling ourselves?